TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donations. Shalom and good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, Israeli officials warn their American counterparts that time is running out for a diplomatic solution vis-à-vis Lebanon. U.S. National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, retired Rear Admiral John Kirby, blames Hamas for the ongoing failure to reach a hostage release deal. The International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Rafael Grossi hopes diplomacy related to Iran's nuclear program is not completely dead. Prospects for the Hezbollah-instigated conflict with Israel to intensify into high-intensity war is seemingly growing by the day. Amid more than 100,000 Israelis displaced from border communities, which are subject to daily cross-border fire by the Iranian proxy in Lebanon, domestic pressure is mounting on Jerusalem's political leadership to utilize the IDF for the purpose of implementing UN Security Council Resolution 1701 by force. And while reports of a new American push to find a diplomatic solution that could avert full-fledged hostilities, Hezbollah has increasingly utilized unmanned aerial vehicles and rockets in cross-border attacks against civilian communities, including in the town of Nahariya, where a UAV struck a high-rise residential building housing displaced Israelis.
I live in the building across the street. There was a siren. I went into the safe room and I heard an unusual explosion. I immediately wrote in our building's chat that I'm sure it hit here outside our home. And as you can see, it hit here, right in the building next to us. I'm originally from Shlomi, and I've been displaced for almost a year. I was evacuated here because this is the center of our lives, but apparently no place is safe anymore. I call on the Prime Minister and the cabinet members, protect the North. Do something already to allow us to live here peacefully. If a rocket was to hit Tel Aviv, by now all businesses would be closed and streets would be closed and a whole country would be shut down and go into a state of emergency. Protect the North. We have no other home.
Following the deliberate attacks by the Iranian proxy Hezbollah on the town of Nahariya, among other civilian communities, IDF Chief of General Staff Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi held a situation assessment of Israel's northern arena with members of the General Staff Forum, after which he stressed that Hezbollah strikes on a residential building in Nahariya is a serious incident, as is the fire directed at the citizens of the north. He further asserted that the IDF is operating forcefully in the north and is in a high state of readiness, with operational plans ready, prepared for any mission required. It is important to know that senior Israeli officials have told their counterparts in the Biden administration that they cannot delay much longer before a military operation will be required. Moreover, the officials reportedly stressed that they don't know whether there is enough time for a diplomatic solution to be achieved. Those statements were made after it was reported that the Biden administration began to work on a so-called Plan B aimed at a diplomatic solution for Lebanon's hostilities versus Israel, amid growing skepticism over prospects to achieve a diplomatic solution for the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, after touring the Egyptian border with the Palestinian enclave, EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell voiced his personal outrage over the prolonged war in Gaza, insisting that the atrocities committed by Hamas on October 7th of last year do not justify Israel's ongoing commitment to eradicate the EU-designated terrorist organization, namely Hamas, due to the devastating ramifications that war inflicts.
Yes, it started with the terrorist attack of Hamas almost 1 year ago, and it was a horror that we have condemned in the strongest possible term, and we continue condemning. But one horror cannot justify another horror. And what's happening in Gaza today is another horror. It's not just a matter of defending. It's, I think, a massive violation of human rights. And the European Union will continue supporting the Palestinians, but at the same time knowing that we have to look for a political solution. Because to feed someone with a dinner tonight in order to be killed tomorrow is not exactly the solution.
Borrell, whose anti-Israel sentiments have been repeatedly put on display during his tenure as EU foreign policy chief, responded to a question about whether the EU would seek to join the mediation efforts for a Gaza ceasefire, while further noting that he does not know the reason for the evident failure of the talks for a ceasefire.
The problem is not to have more mediators. These three are enough. They are enough. Qatar, Egypt, and the US. If they don't manage to get it, it's going to be very difficult that someone else can do it. So we support these diplomatic efforts. We participate, not everything can be made public. In this effort, we regret that for one reason or another, the solution is still not there.
Meanwhile, in Washington, U.S. National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, retired Rear Admiral John Kirby, stressed that while the United States is working day and night to try and realize a hostage release deal, the Islamist Hamas continues to reject any viable solution.
We know how urgent this is, and we're working night and day to try to see if we can get a deal in place. Hamas is the main obstacle to this right now.
Admiral Kirby was further asked about reports on Iranian transfers of ballistic missiles to Russia in support of the latter's war of aggression against Ukraine. And while Kirby did not confirm the reports immediately, which were leaked to the press by intelligence officials, he did highlight the dangers emanating from the deepening Russian-Iranian military alliance.
An Iran that already has an improving ballistic missile program, we could only assume would want to stand to gain from some sort of partnership with Russia to improve their capabilities in the region. And of course, given all their destabilizing activities, that's a dangerous outcome.
It is important to know that the Kremlin outright rejected the reports alluding to the transfer of ballistic missiles from Iran to Russia.
Iran is our important partner. We are developing our trade and economic relations. We are developing our cooperation and dialogue in all possible areas, including the most sensitive ones. And we will continue to do so in interests of people or our both countries.
While both Moscow and Tehran persistently reject any transfers of munitions from Iran to Russia, to include the transfer of unmanned aerial vehicles, in spite of proof to the contrary, in a latest Iranian Foreign Ministry press briefing, spokesman Nasser Kanani stressed the Islamic Republic's determination to further develop its relations with countries such as Russia and China.
Iran will earnestly develop relations with countries such as Russia and China, continue relevant cooperation, implement signed documents and agreements, and base its actions on the shared aspiration of the Islamic Republic of Iran and its partners.
Turning to Vienna, where the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, is holding its Board of Governors meeting this week, at a time when the nuclear watchdog continues to raise the alarm over Iran's nuclear program. On the sidelines of the main event, the IAEA Director General, Rafael Grossi, held a press conference, during the course of which he highlighted that Iran essentially acted out after getting reprimanded during the previous Board of Governors meeting, effectively ratcheting up its nuclear enrichment and installation of new cascades.
After the June board, they made a number of announcements in response, in a certain sense, to what had been done here. And what we see is that there is some work, but nothing that indicates a rush to a fast implementation of a big increase in terms of enrichment production. This is a very, I would say, very generic assessment I would concede.
Grossi was further asked about a recent meeting between EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, and whether the European Union was keeping the IAEA apprised of its own nuclear-related activities vis-à-vis the Islamic Republic of Iran.
We exchange information, of course. The EU colleagues are very close to us, and we are always comparing notes, although our processes at this point are quite different. There is no process going on at the level of the former partnership that used to exist, which is very improbable to be reconstructed, at least in the way that it happened in the past. In our case, what we are trying to do, as I was mentioning in your previous question, we are trying to preserve the basic conditions in terms of information and visibility to facilitate the move for further diplomacy. Would that be the case, which we all hope?
It is important to highlight that while diplomatic efforts behind closed doors are ongoing, some 3 weeks ago, U.S. Representative Mike Turner, who chairs the House Intelligence Committee, warned that Iran could declare itself a nuclear weapon state by the end of the year. Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. It is important for us to highlight that TV7 Israel is 100% donation-based, with all of our programs available free of charge. Therefore, if you're blessed by our programs, we would deeply appreciate it if you'd consider making a donation. You can do so via our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. Separately, I'd like to encourage you, pray for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Essen, wishing you an Erev Mevorach, and God willing, we'll see you during our upcoming TV7 Israel updates. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.